Something a bit different on Insights as a Service this week because I was a guest on the Pax8 Academy podcast. James Davis was nice enough to have me on. We spoke about Lightwire's experience having come from New Zealand into Australia, the lessons learned, the investment required, the ROI, the period in which that was achieved or wasn't, and what we would do differently if we had our time again. So if you're an MSP or a telco currently working in Australia, thinking, is it time to go into New Zealand or vice versa? Hopefully there's a lot of value in this conversation for you. If you don't know who Pax8 is, they are a cloud marketplace for the channel, and they have a very content-led go-to-market strategy where they try very hard to help MSPs and telcos get ahead. We do a very similar thing, and we've created some playbooks that actually align very nicely with the conversation you're about to watch. So if you need to know more about the NBN as a New Zealand operator, we've just created a playbook, the link for which will be in the show notes. And if you're an Australian operator and you need to know a lot more about the New Zealand market and specifically the ultra-fast broadband initiative, we've also got a very detailed playbook for that. Again, the notes are in the links are in the notes that will come along with this episode. Lastly, if you want to check out Pax8's podcast, please also check out the notes. A link to their channel is in there as well. Please enjoy, and we will be back again in 2 weeks with a standard format episode.
G'day everyone, it's James Davis from the Pax8 Academy down here in APAC again, and I've got Brendan Ritchie from Lightwire. Thanks for joining me.
You're very welcome. First time being a guest on a podcast rather than hosting it, so I'm excited, mate. It's a very different vibe, but it should be fun.
I think I still prefer being a guest, so we'll see how you go. Maybe you'll get the itch.
We'll compare notes after.
Well, I really wanted to get you on here because, we've had a lot of conversations backwards and forwards, and what really sparked my curiosity is the fact that you expanding your business from based in New Zealand and expanding and trying to grow it across the ditch here in Australia. And I can see a lot of technology businesses are either needing to think about it or just at that point of thinking there could be an opportunity. So I thought this would be a great time to have you on and explore what's been the challenges, what's went right, what's went wrong, and just get your sort of wisdom to help people fast track it. So
yeah, wisdom's a scary term, but yeah, we'll give it a crack. I'm happy to share my mistakes and the things we've done well. Probably a smaller amount of those, but yeah, should be good.
Well, let's start with what made you want to expand out of New Zealand? That's a big step to actually think about it, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a big call. So I think I'll keep it brief. No one wants to hear a big backstory in these podcast intros, so I'll try and keep it brief. But to understand where I've come from, I had a role with another ISP that shall remain nameless, just in case they don't want to associate themselves with me anymore. Not sure. But my parents were involved in that ISP, and they actually, for lifestyle reasons, actually wanted to move from New Zealand to Australia. And because of that, they thought, let's recreate what we've done as an ISP in New Zealand in Australia. That was my first experience going, okay, I'm an Australian resident working for essentially a New Zealand ISP. And that was up until the end of 2016. And there was probably only about a 3-year period there where that was the case. That might be wrong. I might be getting my chronology wrong. But the key point there is that particular ISP completely changed their business model on the Australian side. They moved away from being a company that worked with the channel to a company that actually tried to be the channel. They tried to be an ISP/MSP, and it never really worked. So anyway, I left that company at the end of 2016 and really didn't have too much of a plan. So I reached out to a man who had been a client of mine in my role at that company, a guy called Andrew Johnson, who is my boss now at Lightwire. And I said, look, I've sold you some fiber from Melbourne to Hamilton. We've met a few times for a coffee on my many trips to New Zealand. Looking for a gig. I look at your website. At that point, it was a rural focused website with pictures of cows and farmers because they sold rural wireless. But I knew they had business customers, but you wouldn't know it by their online presence. And I said, look, I think we should expand into Australia. You should build a voice network. You should bring me on. I don't want to leave Australia. And I think we can help a whole set-aside business brand and build that out. And Andrew being Andrew, he quickly said yes and flew me over a couple of days later to meet the team, and the rest is history. So it's been almost 7 years now. And there's been a hell of a lot of learnings that I guess, we'll go through. But in terms of what made Lightwire take that opportunity, Andrew and I think just saw that it's a massive market. We're excited by the scale. We felt that probably what you hinted at the outset there is that when MSPs and telcos get to a certain size, they actually have customer demand often drive that requirement. And then you have a choice of going either we farm that off and join partnerships or we do it ourselves. And Andrew saw the sense in doing it ourselves and we took a punt and it's been a big 6 or 7 years full of learning. And look, the point of this podcast today is ostensibly to talk about how to do the trans-Tasman thing well. I would have felt, just being vulnerable and honest here, I would have felt somewhat of a fraud coming on and talking about that maybe a year or so ago, when I felt like we'd fired a lot of bullets and not a lot of them had necessarily landed. And it's only been in the last 6 to 12 months where most days we have an inbound lead that's sales qualified from the type of client we want. And I feel that I can now start to speak with some authority on at least what is working, and certainly with some authority on what definitely hasn't worked. Just let me know what you want me to kick off with.
Well, let's start with the challenges. Well, what are some of the biggest challenges you've had to overcome in that time to start to get it to work? And
brand, definitely. So Australians, in my experience, there used to be, and it is changing a little bit, but there was always that no one ever got fired for buying from Telstra. If Telstra screw up, it's not your fault you chose Telstra. Everyone's going to choose Telstra. So that was always just a safety piece that we found it really hard to get past. And almost, why would I buy from you when I can buy from Telstra? And that was if you're going direct. That's a problem. The next one is if you're in the channel, everyone knows everybody. I mean, you only have to meet, I don't know, Ryan Spillane, Wayne Small, Nigel Moore, all these people, everybody knows everybody, right? Like the first time you and I caught up, you introduced me to like a bunch of people, and next thing you know, my whole network's bigger. So you're an outsider who doesn't know anyone, and that's ultimately the biggest challenge. So you've got to prioritize building a network and ingraining yourself in the fabric of that market. And I definitely didn't do that very well. So that was huge, issue on my part. The other one is geographic or perceived geographic focus. Things like domain names, .co.nz, anything looks terrible in the Australian market. .com, .co, okay, probably not .org, but anything that's .com.au looks terrible in reverse. So you have to get away from any perceived geographical bias. And that also means, ideally, having an office. We didn't have an office for the first 4.5, 5 years of being in Australia. And it made a big difference when we got one. You can only do so many job interviews and meetings in cafes, right? And having a base that's nicely designed, even if it's barely used, it gives you legitimacy and a sense of permanency in the market. What else has been things we've had to overcome? Regulatory environment, understanding it, particularly as an ISP. The intercept laws are very different country to country. The obligations around even network builds, you have to notify, particularly in New Zealand, around network builds in a certain way that isn't the same in Australia, but Australia has intercept laws that are quite hard to get your head around as a New Zealander when you're first coming over here. So there's definitely that. I would say the language as well. Like the language was hard because the Australian ISP space used weird terms like Metro Ethernet, E-line. Like I know that they're terms that are used sort of globally, but in New Zealand you've got, just as a compare and contrast, right? We've got UFB, BS2, BS3, HSNS, Hyperfiber now. Over here you've got, NBN TC4, NBN EE, you've got Telstra EA, you've got all these things that neither exists on both sides of the Tasman. So you really have to take the time to understand it and ideally employ smart people locally who can educate you and the rest of the team on it. And I guess there's just the financial overhead. If you're funding it from New Zealand, you're going to cop the exchange rate. You are going to find that you are shifting a lot of money over as you take time to build up. And so another barrier really is the cultural or the willingness barrier from a business perspective to value the endeavor, the effort enough to offset that cost. And I know I'm doing a lot of talking, sorry, but one thing I did want to say is, in terms of that particular barrier, the break-even barrier, it's so hard to know when you've hit that, because it's not as simple as P&L, right? We're bringing in this much money in Australia, it's costing us this much. There's deals we've won in New Zealand where if we didn't have an Australian presence, we simply wouldn't have won them, and they're worth, $1 million plus a year to us. And when it was us versus other competitor, our client has told me years later, hey, that was the defining factor. Everything was even. We liked all the people we're dealing with, but you're in Australia, and that was it. So that's all built in NZD, right? We don't see that on the Australian ledger, but without it, the entire group would done a lot less. So it's not necessarily a barrier, I suppose, but it's a mindset that says we're going to look past just the straight numbers for a period of time and allow ourselves to have some wiggle room around how we justify the endeavor and whether or not it's worthwhile.
Yeah, that sort of mindset thing is very interesting. It would go against most small businesses, wouldn't it? That natural, you've got control of your, let's just say it's that typical 40 to 70 person small business is usually when people start to look to go cross ditch. We're still not that mature in the way that we probably run our finances on our own entity in our own country, let alone then that mental shift to think about it differently in a different country. And the exchange rate would be interesting, because that would impact you. You're basically paying more money to come across here than the other way around. It's probably easier to come from Australia to go to New Zealand.
Absolutely, it is.
The other way.
Definitely. Just on that sort of maturity piece, so Andrew heads up a group called London Green Group, and there's a couple of other companies in that group. And so even though at the time that I joined Lightwire, we only had about 20 people, it was run in a very efficient and mature way. And Andrew has always been very good with his financial management. So, we were lucky in that while Lightwire looked like a small company, really it was run as in a slightly bigger, more mature way. And now we've got 65 staff with Lightwire, and the same thing remains true today. But we did have a slight advantage there, because you're right. For a 20-person company, typically it would be quite a big endeavor to take on all that additional overhead.
Go back to what you said earlier on about like building the network and investing a lot more in local knowledge. Like if you were to do this again, how would you go about it?
I would start the podcast from day one, because honestly, it's been ridiculous. So it sort of gets into a slightly different. I think this would be true of any podcast. I think if it's done well, where an unintended consequence is the people who you have on as guests, who are just good people who, are just happy to share their knowledge and introduce you to other good people. And people didn't really know who we were to any great degree until we started the podcast. And then, I'd finish a conversation like with you, and you said, hey, I think there's some people you should talk to. And then they say, hey, there's some people we should talk to. And then when we have you on, we have Nigel Moore, the latest episode has him on. When you've got hundreds, thousands of MSPs as clients, and that's our target market, and they see us essentially talking to influencers, really, which is what it is, right? It's influencer marketing. And they suddenly go, oh, okay, well, they can't be complete bullshit because they're right next to those people we trust and know. And so it legitimizes the brand far faster than individual meetings or AdWords campaigns or, stall at a conference or whatever. It's actually seeing, oh, I think I kind of know that person because I've seen them talk about stuff enough times. They're talking to people I trust. That person who I trust is promoting the episode they were in with them. It really creates that network. So that would be the one thing I would have done way faster. I actually had someone, a guy Mark, the CEO of Cello, an organization in New Zealand, which telco, which hasn't come over here. And he was saying to me the other day when I met with him that the Australian telco landscape is littered with the corpses of New Zealand businesses that tried to come over here. And he's absolutely right. But I do think that is because they came over as New Zealand businesses. If you if you put your feet on the ground and you go, I'm in Australia, I'm in the Australian market, I need to get to know it and I want to be a part of it, not compete with it necessarily, but be in it and be a part of it. I just think that's the mindset.
I'm curious, like, obviously Australia and New Zealand are very closely aligned culturally, but you did mention a few times there are differences, obviously in the language of specifics, but what other cultural differences are there?
We are quite similar. I don't know how many countries you'd find that are as similar as we are, but I think that people are parochial, and you find that between Queensland, New South Wales, Victoria, right? And then in Christchurch in New Zealand, I find that particularly parochial. That's again a market, right? We're doing well in now because we have someone on the ground who went to school there, who knows the people, and Elliot does a great job down there. But I don't know if it's actually a similarity, and that both sides are parochial and somewhat defensive if they're patch, so quote unquote, whatever that is. But that in itself makes each territory quite unique. And you're down in Tassie, right? And you've got people in different markets. You must see the same thing. It's very tight knit little communities.
It is. It's the who It's if they're mates of mates, then they must be good type of attitude. It goes back to the network of and knowing people and building that sort of credibility. Yeah, and I do think there's a presence thing. It's not just a throw your product out to market. People genuinely want relationships.
They do, but I think one difference is probably what I touched on before, though, is that I do think New Zealand business people, for whatever reason, maybe it's that whole number 8 wire mentality that we like to think of ourselves as having in New Zealand, but are less risk averse. They will go with a new brand. They will try a smaller business if they feel that the people are legitimate and the product is a good fit. In Australia, I just find that, and again, I think this is changing a bit, and I don't want to overgeneralize, but certainly historically, I think there has been a preference to stick with the known, the tried, the true kind of thing, which has made it harder for new entrants to come in and get that sort of initial purchase in the territory they're trying to nail. Do you think that's true? As we Pax8's a challenger, right?
Yeah, I think both of us are both very innovative cultures. I think New Zealand, being smaller, is a lot more open to new things. But on a global scale, Australia and New Zealand are way ahead of giving something a go compared to the US or the EMEA, that kind of thing. So I think as you get microcosms, I do see New Zealanders are much more innovative than Australia. Probably just because of the bigger market we've got, that there's more impacts to just diving in and give something a go compared to New Zealand, because you have to be more innovative. Yeah, I think that's what drives the same difference from us to EMEA to North America as well.
I wonder if that's a byproduct also of just the size of the economy. A lot of New Zealand businesses, even our big businesses for New Zealand, are actually quite small. The definition of enterprise has to be different between the two countries because we just don't have enough of those big ones. The bigger the company, the more bureaucratic, the more boxes need to be ticked. That doesn't necessarily, it does slow things down a bit, but it probably also puts a different lens on and a more risk-averse lens on a decision to choose a vendor.
I think so. I did a little thing the other week around the numbers of businesses between Australia and New Zealand, and I think there's only I can't remember off my top of my head, but there's only 2,800 businesses in New Zealand that were above 100 people.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. Well. So, okay. I feel my point's validated, which is good. I think. Actually, so just slight change of subject. Just I wrote down a couple of things here that actually go back to your point. What challenges do you have to overcome? 2 more. 1, travel budget, because holy crap, you do a lot of travel. The amount of times when I was running, and I still. We've got big enough now that I've got some great people doing a lot of the running around over in New Zealand for us. But for the last probably 17 years, I've been in New Zealand 1 week out of each month on average, right? And that adds up. So you got to have a travel budget. And the second one is time of day coverage. When you're trying to cover everything from WA through to Bloomin' Invercargill, albeit New Zealand's got the one time zone, so don't know why I said that. You really have to think about your scheduling, where people are based, time of day coverage. So that is something that gets harder. You have to satisfy the customer service expectations of more people in more places. So that's from time to time been a tricky proposition.
It's a big investment, isn't it? Like it's high risk, high reward. I guess if you don't get it right, because you like you said, well, all of a sudden you're extending the support hours. That could help you get a lot more deals, like you highlighted before, or you've got some clients in New Zealand signed up because there's Australian presence. It allows you to provide more coverage, all of that kind of stuff, and that's probably intangible. You said it's a bit of that intangible data that you can't quite represent just from a P&L.
Yeah.
But also it's like you throw more people at it, it costs a lot more. It's a bit of a chicken and the egg thing, and that's probably the difficulty for smaller businesses to think about extending over the ditch either way.
I think people can smell bullshit too, right? If you say I'm in Australia as a New Zealand business and you have a PO box somewhere out on your website, people are like, yeah, sure, buddy. Yeah, a 1300 number and a PO box does not an Australian business make. So you really do need to invest in the people, the offices, the capabilities, all of that, right? And one thing we said from the outset was we're going to ensure that we have uniform capabilities across both sides of the Tasman. So if we have a person from Australia or New Zealand come to us saying, can you do UC? Can you do, trans-Tasman protected fiber? Can you do, intermetro protected backhaul? The answer is yes. So we didn't want to have awkward sales conversations based on location. So you're right. It's an investment if you want to do it well. I also think, though, there's an opportunity to be smart about it, which I definitely didn't think about early enough. I kind of hate myself for this because it's so kind of obvious in retrospect. But don't come to a market and go the smartest players to compete head on with everyone who's already doing this particular thing. Think about, as a company coming in from a different place, what can you offer in that market that isn't currently offered there? And easy to say, harder to do. I guess I'll give an example where as a telco in the Australian market, would be stupid to go, hey, you know what we can do? Beat all the Australian telcos in Australia, where they've had a 10-year head start. They've got DCs in every place. Amazing, tier 1 NBN poise, 121 NBN poise. Like, we're not going to beat that. So what can we be? The New Zealand supplier of choice for Australian telcos. Build them an AUD if they want it, NZD if they want it. Be super flexible with how we do it. Have people on the ground who can meet with their people, who understand the market, provide really quality content that talks them through exactly what the New Zealand market is like, what each acronym means, what is the TC4 equivalent, the NBN EE equivalent. You can own that, right? And I don't think there's a lot of other New Zealand businesses doing that well, at least that I've seen, and I'm definitely biased, so take that with a grain of salt. But that's an example of where you can come into a new market, succeed, and again, wish I'd done it earlier, but it's paying off now, and work with the market rather than against it, and not be seen as someone that everyone needs to kind of fob off. So that's a key learning.
I think that's a very, very important one, because I suppose as you expand, not just an expansion, you're having to take in scale into account as well. It's like, what actually is your USP in this, and what value you're providing, because you might have that smaller market and you've taken, that's how we built from, but maybe that's not what's going to take you to the next level of business growth either. Yeah,
and I think when you do have that sort of USP, you can create far more compelling content. And I think content marketing and growth marketing in general, which I think relies on that sort of demand gen content play, it's so much easier to stand out from the crowd when your content focuses on a niche. And again, you're not trying to be everything to everyone in what is already a fairly saturated market. So if you can add words, right? What search terms you're looking to capture gets way easier, lower cost. You're not fighting for NBN as a search term. You're looking for NZ wholesale or something, or AU wholesale for NZ searches or whatever. So yeah, there's definitely some advantages to doing that, and it's far more cost effective for businesses on a limited budget. I would say though that we've already done that, so probably any other telco listening, don't worry about it now, it's done. So yeah, probably
tick. No
Yeah.
competition.
That's it. Yeah. Pro monopolies, Lawa. We're super pro monopoly. Yeah.
So if you were to open up another branch, trying to get into a market, like starting in Australia again, spoken about that boots on the ground, the parochial type stuff. what sort of people would you start off having in that presence?
I guess I think you've got to have two, really. I don't know which one I'd pick first, really, but I think you've got to have someone who can meet in a pre-sales technical capacity to talk with some confidence around, customers' requirements, the problem they're trying to solve, and how this actually scope it. Is this fit for purpose? And that just builds so much trust. Like, again, we're a channel-focused entity, so the people we're talking to are smart. They know bullshit, and they already know quite a lot about the products. What they're looking for is just that step up. Okay, I know the feature set, but my customer's requirements are X. In this case, will that particular feature cut the mustard? And you need someone who can have that conversation in person. And then the second one is someone who is likable, a good salesperson. They don't have to be technically brilliant, but they have to do what they say they'll do when they say they'll do it. Be reliable and likable, and they are the people who ultimately will go and make sure the relationships are sound, because people buy from people. And also that pre-sales technical person ideally shouldn't be a dickhead either. Obviously, no one should be. It's important that when you're a company with very few people, the people you have need to be likable, and they need to be invested, and they need to be motivated. And how you do that as a business is obviously up to you, but there's a whole range of ways to do that through incentives of various kinds.
Yeah, I think where that sort of what you're talking about with like someone that's building the network, the more sales relationship side, and that sort of technical person. From my experience, I think you need to invest in both to start. Like, I think you're 100% right. Like, you could start with the salesperson and build all this network, and there's no one to back them up.
Yeah.
Or you've got to be very clever in the way that you back them up. On the flip side, if you've got that more technical person, they're not going to build the network, so you're relying on a lot of people to come to them. And without that marketing and the sales, a clever sales approach, you'll probably get limited amount of people coming to you. I think that's probably the mistake I see a lot with businesses expanding into new regions. They lead with one or the other and not realize actually it's both.
Yeah, and I think I understand why businesses do it, in that they might have a likable sales type going out and trying to leverage the resources they already have in another jurisdiction, but they really, you can't really go past. Even though I know we do a lot on and it sounds like a pre-COVID approach, but I know we do a lot on Teams and Zoom, etc. But I still think in person, first meeting, second meeting, whatever, after a scope and call, go see them in person, create that sense of buy-in, that sense of trust, particularly again, where it's a recurring business model. Pax8's the same, right? You guys are in there for the long term with your clients. You need to have that establishing and retaining a relationship off a solid base. We're the same. If you're doing transactional sales, okay, different probably, and I'd be open to push back on that, but certainly for relationship-based selling, there is that need to go, look, we're not sort of phoning in support as we need it from some other place. You're never going to meet this person. I just think there's the need to be there in person.
Yeah, like we're using Pax8 as an example because obviously we're large and we're in the whole region. Like, we are investing in having local presence around the different states and major cities because of that. Like, it's that you need some form of relationship. And I think you probably don't need to worry about having too much expertise locally. Like, use me as an example. I can always be flown in if it's that important to go see a partner. And I think there's that sort of balanced approach of finding what's the base level of presence you need, and then work out how do you manage the other communication and interactions in the business. And like you touched on earlier, travel budgets are super important.
And they're not small. I actually think the other thing I didn't touch on is just culturally within your own business. When I joined Lightwire, it was a business of roughly 20 people all in one office in Hamilton. Since I've joined Lightwire, we now have people across 2 countries and about 8 cities, and trying to keep a sense of cultural alignment, people actually knowing who the hell they work with, and a company where we deeply care about that. That's been difficult as well. Not difficult to the point that we haven't overcome it, but for example, at head office, when I started, we had a gym on site and a full-time PT, that people got to use during business hours. Andrew, as a business owner, has always been very focused on culture and well-being. So he's done a lot of quite progressive things. So then people, when I started in Australia, it was like, okay, we'll pay for your gym remotely and we'll introduce a well-being allowance and stuff. That's all great. That aligns people, makes no one feel like they're missing out because of where they're based. That's kind of a big tick. But the next one is, do people actually ever see each other? Do they know who they're working with? I've worked with people for a long time and I've liked them. That's fine. But when I met them in person for the first time, over a coffee, over a beer, whatever, I felt like I actually connected. And I think that's super important. And we try and get everybody together twice a year during Christmas. We have Lightwire days when we get everyone there, where we have a couple of days with a particular focus. Last time it was the 5 dysfunctions, going through what they mean, how we avoid them, doing sessions with, I think it was about 15 to 20 people at a time, led by Scott, our Chief Operating Officer, and I. That's super important. And it is a challenge, and it does take constant focus, and it does cost money because you got to fly people around and put them up and all that kind of stuff. But mate, it's you can't get around it.
Yeah, and that too, having multiple people everywhere, goes back to the time zone challenge too. You've only got limited time where most of your team cross over to interact with each other virtually. So you've got to be very deliberate about holding formal meetings and things like that, and not going into that sort of time creep of people working long hours to cover the time zones, because that's the only time you can talk to each other.
That's a good point too. I actually work, I've always worked somewhere between 6:30 and 7 starts, and I finish at 3 or 3:30 to make sure that I'm keeping in touch as best I can with people on both sides. But yeah, we've definitely got, daylight savings sucks. Basically, it's so confusing. Every meeting we've got. So yeah, that is a challenge. And I don't even think we've nailed that, because you're constantly adjusting or balancing between customer requirements, team communication requirements, the fact that people in roles like mine, like our head of service and provisioning over here, one of our Newark architects based over here obviously being Southeast Queensland, they have a responsibility for clients on both sides. There are BDMs in the South Island that will be like, hey, I need this network architect to be on a call at this time. Well, okay, that turns out that's 7 a.m. Brisbane time. So you're right, that's a challenge, and honestly, it's a work in progress, to be honest.
Yeah, I've been doing it for a long time in my role, and it's every year daylight savings hits, and
yes,
just
if Queensland could just get it together and stop worrying about the curtains fading or the cows going for their milk or whatever the issue is, or just everyone stop doing it, I don't care which, just pick a lane and do it, that'd be great.
I think as our economies evolve, we're probably going to have to get a lot more aligned especially between Australia and New Zealand, at least, let alone Southeast Asia, because it's not just time zones with daylight savings, it's also public holidays, right? Like each state has their own different public holidays. New Zealand, Australia have different public holidays.
We just had King's birthday yesterday. We're recording, what's the day? So Tuesday the something, the 7th? Is that the 7th day? Tuesday 7th. 6th, there you go, that's close. Yep. So yesterday was the King's birthday in New Zealand, right? And not here in Australia. So yeah, we had pretty much most of the company off. And that's another thing too. If there was genuine domestic equivalent travel between the two countries, that would make a lot of people's lives easier. It would be so much more efficient for so many people in so many businesses. So I think that genuinely is something that needs to be looked at.
So you've been doing this, and like you said, probably in the past 6 to 12 months, you've been being a lot more confident and probably starting to reap the rewards. Now you're on the other side of a lot of challenges. There's always going to be challenges. Mm-hmm. What do you see? How do you see that you're going to grow and leverage that? The fact that you're across Tasman.
What we're finding is that we have fairly large Australian clients now that don't have the scale to go fully into New Zealand. So they're looking for a partner. We've got a lot of that, and vice versa. Being the Australian partner, Australian supplier of choice for New Zealand entities, and that's obviously a nice natural fit. We've actually got better in recent times in just simplifying our messaging too, which is really making it easier for people to find us and understand what we actually think we do well. So yeah, in terms of how we're going to leverage it and what we're going to do, I see us being very busy. We're having most days now, I've got several inbound leads, a lot of it coming from Australia, to be fair, which is fantastic. I think we're going to see people looking to do things as efficiently as possible in a tough economic environment, and our job is to explain to people why operating on both sides of the Tasman with our assistance is the smartest thing to do, or is a smart thing to do, and how we can make it as profitable and low risk as possible. So yeah, that's the focus over the next 6 to 12 months, and obviously, keeping parity around the product space. There's still a lot happening. Everyone, particularly in the UC space, is moving pretty quickly. So got to make sure we don't rest on our laurels there. But yeah, it's a tough one at the moment because everyone keeps talking about this looming recession, but I don't see any sign of it in terms of purchasing patterns from clients. And I see a lot of people signing a lot of new terms and new services, and don't know. Did that answer your question? Was that the question you're asking? Okay, good. I just started talking then and sort of kind of forgot what I was talking about, so sorry.
You're used to asking the questions, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm out of my comfort zone. This is not my space. But you're right. I actually think, I don't know, I think it's easier. It's weird. You said at the outset, it's easier being the guest. I think it's easier being the host because as long as you've done enough research to ask the questions and set them free, but being a guest, you feel less like you've got to say something smart, weirdly, because you're assumed to know what you're talking about because you've been asked the question. I don't know. It's a weird space. I'm still figuring it out.
We could talk a lot about this, and this is very much a subject that I'm very keen on because I can see not just Australian and New Zealand companies going each way over the ditch. I do think both Australia and New Zealand need to look a lot more into Southeast Asia.
Singapore is a really interesting market.
Singapore, Thailand, Indonesia, Philippines, Malaysia, they're all massive markets. They're all bigger than Australia and New Zealand combined, except for Singapore. Well, their GDP is obviously a lot larger, but in terms of population sizes, we've got a lot of opportunity. And like you said, we do a lot of innovation. So I want to sort of build this thought process up and this ecosystem across Pax8 to get our businesses bigger across the region. But if you were to, looking back in your crystal ball and knowing what you know now, if you were to start up in a new region, how much would you be budgeting to invest into doing it properly? Like, forgetting money is an issue, and you just said I had X amount of money to start realistically. What would you think you'd need to do that?
You mean you'd be looking at better part easy, $300K for salaries year one. You'd need to, presuming you're in a telco type environment, the infrastructure, right? You've got to actually have some DCs that easily be smashing $10K a month in rack fees, cross connects, transit. Then you got to get your certification, presumably, or your MSAs in place with your vendors over there. So whichever market it is. So I hate to think of, if you do that with NBN here, that's several $100,000 in probably 6 to 9 months, and that's probably just to get your first POI live. So yeah, you'd burn through $1 million, you'd think, in your first year or so. I don't know. It'd be significant. And again, it's going to vary by market, by industry segment, by your ability to relocate existing people to a new market while they continue to fulfill functions in the market they just came from. Because you can move people around. We've actually done that quite a lot in Australia. I think we've got 1, 2, 3, or I feel like I'm missing out someone. At least 3 people who now live in Australia that were with us in New Zealand. That we have a 4th plant. That's right. So very much that helps a lot if you want to decrease costs. But yeah, look, it's absolutely a burning pit of money year one. The thing is, well, okay, that's fine. No one minds spending money as long as there's a return. And so how quickly can you convince yourself that return's going to come there? And again, I just go back to ingrain yourself in the market, legitimize your brand as best you can. Don't take on the market head on, find a niche, and then create content that establishes you as an expert within that niche and makes it easy for people to find you and educates them on the problem that you uniquely can solve, and they may not even realize they had yet. I'll give you one example. So the other day I met with a guy. I won't drop names because you know him, but just in case you just want me to say, But he said to me, look, we've had so many opportunities in New Zealand, and I just didn't even know where to start. And he's like, so now this makes that easy, right? And this is a company with like 100 plus people, 100 plus staff, well established, quality operator. But it's just when you have opportunities incrementally coming to you, oh, here's a New Zealand opportunity. Yeah, not too hard. Don't worry about that. Then there's another one. Oh, yeah, too hard. Don't worry about that. But if you actually take them bit by bit, it's a huge opportunity you're missing. But people, again, don't know where to start. You can, by going and having lunch and dinner with people and not trying to compete with them head on, but saying, what problem can I help you solve? Here's something we do that others don't. Man, if I had my time again, that would have been my focus day one. Just that.
I had some golden advice, and the budgeting thing just brought that up to spark some thoughts from people. It's probably just going to cost you a couple of million. So there's two ways to go about it: is bootstrap it and work it out. The other thing is acquisition. It's something that we don't think about. Well, maybe if I'm an MSP in Australia, maybe I just acquire a New Zealand MSP and I've already got local presence. And obviously that comes with its own challenges, but that's a different way to go to market.
Very, very legitimate. Absolutely. Absolutely. And I do think, if you ask about trends earlier on, one I didn't get to is I do think we're going to start to see NZ MSPs and telcos, and we're probably already seeing the MSP space, to be fair, the telco space less so, but certainly in the telco space, I think we're going to start to see Australian telcos buying up New Zealand ones, and New Zealand telcos buying up small to medium-sized Australian ones as well, because you're right, that's a good way to get existing revenue, solve a problem, go forward. But I do think the multiples at the moment are still relatively high, so yeah.
Well, wrapping it up, if you could leave everyone with a final thought, what's the thing you'd most want people to take away from this conversation today? What would that be?
What works in one place probably won't work in the other. No one cares about what you do in the other country. In our case, no one in Australia cared about what we did in New Zealand. They care about what you can do here. So go talk to people, understand the market, listen, learn, don't come in all guns blazing thinking that you know what is going to work and what you're best to do. Set time aside to listen and educate yourself. That would be. And also, by the way, probably don't be as young as I was when I first started doing it, because I definitely thought I had all the answers, or just didn't want to admit that I didn't have all the answers. So being older and at least a little bit wiser is also a good thing.
That's some sage advice, and I really appreciate you jumping on, Brendan, and no doubt we'll have another conversation in the future and learn from more lessons that you've had in the future.
Mate, I'll have to get you back on our podcast next. It's my turn. But no, it's been fun, mate. Thank you for having me on.
Thanks very much.